So now that we have a very simple front-end application running, let's get started with the broker service. So first thing I'm going to do is stop my front end, which I still have running. So I'll click on the terminal and hit Control-C to stop it, and then I'll close my terminal. Now, I want to create a new folder over here at the same level as front end. But if I try to do that using this button, it's always going to add it to the front end folder because this is a workspace. So instead, I'll go back to the Finder and find that folder where front end exists. I'll create a new folder, which I'll call broker-service. And that's right beside front end. Okay? Then I'll go back to Visual Studio Code, go to the File menu, and say Add Folder to Workspace. And it should let me browse for that, and I'll just choose Broker Service and click Add. There. Now I have Broker Service added. So let's now get started. I'll open my terminal, and I'll go up one level, and then into Broker Service. And I'll type go mod init, and I'm just going to call mine broker, like this. Now you might want to call yours github.com/your username/broker or whatever you want, but just for simplicity, I'm going to go with broker. So that creates a go mod file. Now, let me close my terminal. Inside the broker service folder, I'll create a new folder called CMD, which is pretty standard when you're building web applications. And then I'll create another folder inside of the CMD folder called API. Okay? And finally, inside of the API folder, I'll create a new file, which I'll call main.go. And this is the main entry point to the broker service. Okay? So, package main, and we're going to have a main function. So, func main. Okay, now what do we want to do in here? Well, right now, it's going to be pretty simple. I want to have one root, just the slash, the top level of the application will work for us. And I want that to respond, or to accept a JSON payload, do something with it, and then respond, saying, yeah, I've got the response. I just want to make sure that I can connect from the front end to the broker service. So we'll make this dead simple. Now, over time, this broker will become much more complex. It's only going to do one thing. It's going to take requests and forward them off to some microservice and then send a response back. So why don't we make our lives easier and install a really good third-party routing package, okay? So I'm going to open my terminal, make sure I'm in the broker service folder. I am. And I'm going to go and get one of the routing packages that I really like. Go get, and it's from github.com/go-chi/v5. Now, if you're taking this course and V6 is out, please stick with V5 for right now. Anytime you change a major version, there's usually breaking changes. And for the sake of simplicity, stick with version 5 for this course. Version 6 isn't out and probably won't be for quite some time. But if it is, stick with version 5, and after you're done, go and update to version 6 if you want to. So I'll go get that. And I'm also going to hit the up arrow to get my command back. And I'll just add /middleware, because I'll use some of the middleware that's available to us. And finally, I'll backspace over the middleware part and the V5 part, right up to here, go chi, and just put CORS, because we need to implement CORS protection so we can actually communicate from the front end to the back end. So there's 3 packages I'm going to need, okay? So let's go back over to the CMD API folder and create a new file, which I'll call roots.go. And this will be all of the roots for our application. Again, it's in package main. Let me close the terminal here. And I'm going to create a function with no receiver yet. We'll add one in a minute, called roots. And it returns an http.handler right there. Okay? And inside of that, I'll create a variable mux, which is the common name when you're using routing in Go. And it's of type chi.newRouter. And I'll make sure I get the right one, version 5. That's it. Okay? So now I have this variable. So now we want to specify who is allowed to connect. And chi makes that really simple. Mux.use, newRouter has to have parentheses after it. That's why that's not working. Mux.use, and I want to use, from the CORS package I just imported, handler, And it takes one argument, cors.options. And then I just specify the options I want. Now in my case, I want allowed origins. I'm going to make that wide open for right now for development. So a slice of strings is what it requires. And I'm going to say accept any HTTPS:// And the second one, HTTPS, which has to be in quotes, HTTP:// Okay? And strings doesn't have an S. I can't type today. That happens sometimes. So that's my first thing. And what are the allowed methods? Allowed methods, right there. And again, it's a slice of strings. And I'm going to allow get, and post, and put, and delete, and say options. That should be sufficient for our purposes. And then what headers are allowed? Allowed headers. And I'm going to allow a slice of strings. I'll allow accept as a header, and authorization, and content-type. And we're not going to use it right away, and we may not use it at all, but it's always useful to accept x-csrf-token. Cross-site request forgery protection, okay? And the next one I want is what are the exposed headers? And for our purposes, a slice of strings with one entry, just link. That should be sufficient. And allow credentials, we'll make that true. So we're allowed to send request or to deal with credential requests. And max age. And a good default one for that is 300. Okay? So I have some middleware set up, my cors handling. And now I want to take advantage of another one. mux.use, and this is just built into Qi. It's called middleware.heartbeat. Right there, make sure you get version 5. It is. And the heartbeat URL is just ping. This will allow me to, if I want to at some point in the future, really easily make sure that this service is still alive by checking for its heartbeat. Okay? Now, we don't have any handlers yet, so I can't do anything else, but what I can do is just say return mux. Okay, so this will be our root. But I want to actually add a receiver here that allows me to share any configuration I might have for my application with roots, in case I need them. So let's go back to main.go. And before my main function, first of all, I'll declare a constant. What port am I going to listen on? Say web port. And that will be equal to the string of 80. We'll listen on port 80. And we can do that because this will be running in Docker, and Docker can listen on port 80 for any container. Now I'll declare a type, and this will be the receiver I'll use for the application. I'll call it config, and it's just a struct. And right now it's empty. Okay? And now down in the main function, I'll create a variable called app, and it's of type config. I'll just make it empty for now. We'll populate that later. Now I'll print to the log file, say just log.println. Starting broker service on port %s and put web port in there. Okay, so that'll print to the log file, or to the screen in our case. And now we'll define an HTTP server. So define HTTP server. And that's as simple as saying serve, SRV, is assigned the value of a reference to http.server. And I populate a few of its fields. So the address we have to have, and that will be equal to format.sprintf. And my format string is just a colon and then %s. And I substitute for that %s web port. And it didn't import format for me, so I'll just go do it manually. FMT there. And now we start the server. Start the server. And I'm going to start it by saying error is assigned the value of srv.listenandserve. And we'll check for an error. If error is not equal to nil, then we'll say log.panic with the error. Okay? Now, I also want to have the roots added in here. But before I do that, I'll go over to roots.go and give this the receiver of app, which is of type pointer2config. Now I can go back to main.go and put my second required field in here, which is handler, and I'm just going to call app.roots. And it shouldn't be log.println, it should be log.printf, and then I put a carriage return after this because printf doesn't add that automatically. Okay, so now I should be able to open my terminal, clear the screen, and run this just to make sure it all compiles. Go run./cmd/API. And there it is. That works. Now it's not doing anything. So let's go back here now and create a new file inside the CMD, inside the API folder. I'll create a new file that I'll call handlers.go. And it's in package main. And I'll define a handler. One handler and then add it to my roots file. So I'll declare a function with my receiver of app pointer2config, and I'll just call this one broker. And because it's a handler, it requires a response writer, which I'll call w, http.response-writer, and a pointer to a request, which I'll call r, pointer to http.request. So it will receive some kind of payload, which I'm just going to ignore right now. We'll send something to it, and it will ignore it for the moment. I just want to make sure there's connectivity here. Now I'm going to be sending JSON back as my response. So let's make our lives easier and declare a new type up here, which I'll call JSON response. And it's a struct, and it has a few fields. The first one is called error. It's a Boolean. And in JSON, I want to call that error, all lowercase. And I'll have some kind of message, which would be a string. And in JSON, I'll call that message. And sometimes, not right now, but down the road, we're going to be putting additional data in there. And because I'm using Go 1.18, I can specify the type as any. Now, if you're not using 1.18, you'll have to do this, interface. Okay? But I'm using 1.18, and hopefully you are too. So I'll just say any. Saves a few characters in typing. In JSON, I'll call that data, and I'm going to omit it when it's empty. So omit empty. Okay? So now I have a JSON type. That means I can create a variable of that type and populate it with some stuff. So I'll call this one payload, and it's of type JSON response, and I'll just populate error as false, and message hit the broker. Okay? Now, the next step, of course, is to write this data out. Now, we're going to do some helper functions in a while that will make this easier, but for now, I'll just do it by hand. So, out, and ignore the error, come from the JSON package built right into the Go standard library, and we'll use Marshall indent to make it nice and pretty. So I'm going to Marshall payload. I'm not going to have any prefix, but I'll indent things by one tab, which I have to type correctly, by one tab. That's better. That gives me some data I can send back in the correct format. So now I need to set the header, w, which is my response writer, dot header, dot set, and I want to set the header content dash type to be application slash JSON. Okay, so I've set the header. And I'll also add a header, w.writeHeader, say http.status accepted, write header. That's better. And now send this out. So w.write out. And that has to have a capital W. That's better. So now I have a handler called broker. So let's go back to our roots file and let's add a root mux.post, and it's just to the root level, and that goes to app.broker. Okay? So let's make sure this all compiles and runs properly. Go run./cmd/API. Seems to be running. Perfect. Okay. So that's a good start. Now the next step, of course, is to get this into a Docker image. And that's actually pretty straightforward. So we'll take care of that in the next lecture.